Hybrid heated computer.
Well, I adjusted it back up this week, and if I run it with my office door closed, my room will go up 6 degrees in an hour.
Okay, welcome everyone. So we've actually got a pretty good turn up tonight. We have up to 22, 22 people. 22 people, including the conference room. So
23.
Yeah. Okay, so welcome everyone to the August session. Now, normally we hold these on the second Wednesday of the month, but there was a clash, which means we had to move it out a whole day. So hopefully that hasn't caused any issues for anyone. So welcome. My name's Mark O'Shea, and I'll just get Steve, Jeroen, and Aresh to do a quick intro as well.
After Steve, like just following the order.
So I'm Steve. Hi.
Hi, Steve.
I work for Microsoft doing Windows stuff.
Hi, that's Aresh. I work as a senior solutions architect with Dell Technologies.
And last but not least.
Hello.
Yes.
From the other side of the world, Europe, doing stuff with Modern Workplace, MVP, MCT, that's kind of stuff. I love beer, craft beer especially.
And just to explain the order of the names, that was my confidence in who would be here. So it was basically stack. It was stack ranking.
Perfect time of the year.
Okay, so let's just sort of jump in and we'll cover off the agenda quickly. So in a moment, because I think we do have a few new people here, we'll just, anyone who's new who wants to either unmute or drop a comment into chat, just introducing themselves. And then the two topics that we've got for today, the first one is a follow-up from some of the things we started talking about last month around the different Windows app deployment options that Intune gives you. And I guess best practices, what do you do? What do you try to avoid to do? What approaches have changed for you since you first started working with Intune? So it's kind of like on its own, that's probably like a bottomless well of thing we can dig into. But then for the second topic, we've got update rings. So how do you go about planning different pieces of your software stack that you can schedule updates for, etc. Now there may be an overriding reason or an overarching reason as to why that may be a topic of interest this month. It's not like this has been a really quiet month. There's nothing at a global level that seems to have happened. IT has been a very happy, friendly place for everyone. But probably still a topic, something that we should talk about. And then final bit, if you haven't been previously, normally after we get through that, normally we switch off the session recording once we do get to the general discussion piece, because sometimes people have got some topics that they want to ask about, but they don't want it sort of being recorded for posterity's sake. So that's just more of a general Q&A after we go through the official content. So let's continue on then. So just anyone who is joining for the first time or maybe hasn't attended for quite a while, if you just sort of want to drop a note in telling us where you are, where you're, which part of the world you're joining from.
And if you would like to turn on the camera while you're doing that, that's optional.
Nobody wants to.
Nobody.
Well, hang on.
It's still holiday season here in Europe, in the Netherlands especially.
Yeah, it is. Apparently, it's still summer over there.
Yeah, 2 weeks of Italy, 35 degrees.
Yeah.
Freaking hot.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got some Sydney people, Brisbane, okay.
Some in London, I think I saw.
Yeah,
Yep.
London was the first. Yeah, cool.
don't think any of my teammates are in this.
Western Australia. Oh, wow.
Oh, Sweden.
Okay, so we've got a,
Sweden.
okay, so we've got, yeah, okay, so we do have quite a few, because I was looking at the names going, okay, I don't remember every name of people who attend. I'm generally terrible with names, but I was looking at that list going, okay, we've got a bit of a different mix than what we normally have. So, yeah, so thank you everyone for joining. Thank you for dropping some details in so that we know where you're coming from. So just I guess then just to sort of kick things off, because I think we will have, I have a feeling we're going to struggle for time today.
Yes.
We are.
Yeah. So, so just quickly here with events, if you are in Sydney or if you are Sydney based, or you can organise to be Sydney based for the 27th of August at the Microsoft building in North Sydney, there is the Workplace Ninjas meetup. Christian Brinkoff, one of the Win 365 PMs, will be here. So, you know, if you're somebody who likes to give feedback to the people who can actually act on feedback, as opposed to yelling into the void or complaining in online forums, like complaining in online forums and YouTube comments is always fun, but having somebody who can actually take your feedback and actually take it properly as feedback, so highly recommend that you come along to that. It's free, and a question that normally comes up about it is food provided? Yes, food is provided. I don't know if they'll give you every single meal of the day. Sorry? Yeah, and I think drinks at the end of the day. Yeah.
Normally.
So don't drive. There's plenty of the new stations here haven't opened yet, have they? Okay.
Supposedly imminent, but they have been for a while.
Yeah.
The station area is
Yeah, okay.
food court area.
Coffee
today.
Yeah.
Coffee.
Okay. And again, if you are going to be coming along to Workplace Ninja and you're someone that we haven't met before, just let us know, because we know that sometimes if you're heading to an event where you don't know anyone, just being able to put faces to names can make the day a bit easier for you. So that's all of the preamble before.
On the events, I'm not sure, but there is whether it's targeted or something like that, but there is a Microsoft event as well a day before. No?
You might be a partner or specified type.
Okay,
Yeah.
so targeted, sorry.
Yeah. So, damn it, now I have to go back and edit the recording to remove that. Thank you.
Oh, I just heard you had a volunteer.
Okay, so normally it's accidentally revealing PII that goes, oh, got to go through and blur a few things out there. Okay, so the first topic, Windows application deployment. So we're going to split this into multiple sections. The first piece, what we'll talk about is if you're probably things that you're already doing is either deploying Win32 apps through the Win30, I guess, what Steve would probably call the Win32 app deployment option, because it's a lot easier just to believe that there's one and ignore the others. And then the other one is just some stuff around M365 apps as well. So the first part here, we'll just sort of focus on basically users' devices, whether it's say desktops or laptops, etc. The second part, Aresh is going to jump in and cover variations of this conversation, but when you're applying it to Win365 and AVD, because I guess especially with AVD, the recommendations, the things you can do some very different things with AVD.
Very different.
But does that mean that you should be doing them? So for the first part here, don't worry too much if we're not talking about Win365 stuff or AVD. Aresh will jump in and cover that. So let's just jump on into the first piece, which is, there are quite a few different ways or different app deployment options that we've got in here. So really here, let me just see, the ones that we'll be focusing on in here would be, Microsoft 365 apps. Hopefully, I think this one hopefully just ends up being a pretty simple one. I don't think people are trying to be as creative as they used to be to get that done. And then the other one here is the Win32 apps, but I've got one line in there about line of business app, just to sort of see what, if anyone is doing much around that, or if it's, Win32 or bust for most people. So that takes us into the next piece. Let me just jump back over to Win32 app. So I've just got a few things up here, just really as conversation starters, rather than trying to dig too deeply into them. So I guess what I just sort of want to do is either via chat, or if you've got a really strong opinion that you think must be shared with everyone in a forcible way, rather than typing it in bold, you can unmute and yell at us and tell us that we're wrong.
Especially Mark.
Yeah, so it's just the PowerPoint up there. So here, I guess just some of the things in here is like I've even though here I'm kind of positioning it as or what I'm trying to do here is trying to position it as not the strict Win32 app deployment option in Intune, even though that's probably where we'll end up. Saying that is what you should be doing wherever possible. But looking for some exceptions and things along those lines. And I guess, the reality here is that there's still going to be some things you may have to do for particular apps or in particular environments for particular scenarios where you may have to jump back in and just push a PowerShell script out to deploy things, for example. So I guess is there anything in particular from this list that, anyone wants us to sort of start talking about first? Anything that you've got other questions about that are maybe not on screen related to Win32 apps, but that you've got some questions on. Now, I guess just the disclaimer that I'll put in here before any responses come through, we are deliberately not talking about updating the apps. That is a different topic where I think that's kind of like an annual topic for us. We pull Ben out of whatever coffin he's been hiding in, dust him off, give him a hose, and let him loose. We won't have that opportunity as much anymore. So I guess just anything up there that or even with your own Win32 app deployment options, things that you're doing that maybe are a little bit different, things where you're having trouble trying to figure out what the correct approach is to do something based on good practices today versus what somebody showed you 5 years ago, for example.
So Brendan's just put a link there, Mark, around 365 deployments.
Okay, so that's Aaron's site up there. Yeah. It's really sad when you see a site and you go, oh yeah, I know who that is. Oh, Stealth Puppy has got a kitty. We approve of Aaron's site.
Yeah.
Okay. So in this case, it's when we are going through here, probably if we sort of start off with things like the Microsoft 365 apps, the switching. So basically, are you switching from Win30 or from x86 to x64? Is that what you mean by architecture?
Yeah, that's correct. So we've got a bunch of specific driver and app cases where we unfortunately still have to do that. So I've just basically put a bunch of detection rules on that to easily have it switch between the two without having to make any additional effort.
So I guess then that's like just another question generally here. Actually, we've got the M365 stuff next, but I guess, so can we sort of park the M365 conversation for the next slide?
Totally.
Yeah. So
Mark's just excited because he has slides.
and you can see, like, I spent hours, I prompted the hell out of Copilot to come up with this rich graphical design we're using here. I really should remember. I'm paying for it. I should use it.
Yeah, you should.
So I put in photos of cats like Aaron's webpage.
Yeah, but the AI cats are, let's say, interesting.
I know, I just get it to use stock image ones rather than generating.
No, the generating's fun though.
Not the same as humans. Like look at the pause, you know.
Yep. Yeah. Okay. So any particular questions then on this? So should we just sort of pick something here? So I'll start off with something saying that, we're not getting anything specific here just yet. So how many of you are using the line of business option to push out things like MSIs, AppX, etc.? So that third item on the list, or the third bullet point, like, is anyone actually doing anything with MSIX or MSIX bundle?
Not by a line of business, but I know you can, like, if you want to get the latest stuff, for example, if you want to get, like, Mitch would know because he told me, you want to get like the latest bundle for Winget and pump it on a machine during the image phase. Obviously, you can call that and install it just via PowerShell scripts in your task sequence. But I personally, we're not using any line of business deployments.
The only thing I do with line of business is get rid of it because people know that it conflicts with Win32 and autopilot, and you inevitably need a Win32 app at some point.
Yeah.
So
even if it means the dirty word of repackage.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, if you get it right, like it just drops in and it doesn't matter anyway. So
yeah.
Tom's got a question there around thoughts on out-of-band mechanisms like Winget or Azure Storage. Is that to better handle distribution of content or just not upload it, Tom?
Yeah, that was mostly around bypassing the Win32 size limit. So a bit of an old school thing now that the limit got raised. But we're seeing a bit of that now with customers wanting to use Winget because it's just an easier mechanism to manage. But obviously you lose delivery optimization and some of that integration there.
Yeah, and that's the thing that's, for me, that's kind of soured me a little bit on Winget, is even though there is, like, if you go through the Winget ini file, like there is a delivery optimization setting in there, but it's only when you are downloading from DO enabled when you're downloading packages from DO enabled websites. So it's one of those things where if it's an org where bandwidth isn't a concern, then obviously it's not an issue. But for a lot of orgs, they're not quite at that stage yet. Whether it's, there's always going to be something where they want some kind of caching mechanism to to speed things up there. And especially when it's like if we're in this situation where, updates that are getting pushed out are new versions of the app. So they're full, basically full-size versions as opposed to the olden days of Windows Store. And, a lot of that would be Delta updates. Yeah. So
just send down the MSP.
So some of these things, like as much as they move things forward in a certain way, there are other, I guess, as far as your internal infrastructure goes, they start pushing things backwards a bit. But for the Azure storage side, one of the things that I haven't had a chance to play with it yet, but there's a role in people are either going to like this or absolutely hate what I'm about to say. And I think Steve's going to hate this. So if we sort of get a bit more specific with Azure storage, one of the things you can do there is if you actually want to give things more like drive letter mapping for installs out to the install source. One of the things that I think it was Server 2022 Azure Edition introduced was it allowed you to start basically having like a relay, I think like an HTTPS relay into Azure file share without having to have port 445 open. So it was doing it all over 443. But it means that you've got to deploy additional infrastructure into Azure to then use Azure file shares in Azure storage. And Azure file share storage costs more than regular storage. So there's all these increments. So as much as people who are tied to, I want it to be who's got a favorite drive letter? I'll say S for Steve. Because Steve is not condoning this at all. So So there are people who say, look, we just want to have like a universal drive letter. And at least that option gives you, the workaround, or gives you ongoing access to Azure storage or to the Azure file shares for that. Because trying to use people who've tried to use it as a general purpose file share solution, who haven't looked at what the requirements are, they just don't realize how heavily 445 is blocked. Like, so even like your ISP may be doing it by default.
Yeah.
If you're on a consumer account, you may not even get the option to disable it. They're saying no good is going to come of this. So obviously everything is safer when we tunnel it over 443. So there are multiple ways, like there are a lot of creative ways that you can sort of do these, do these kinds of things. One of the things that I was expecting, and this is based on no secret or special information at all, but one of the things that I was expecting to see from the Azure side was maybe or I'm sure there might actually be a third party offering in the marketplace to do it, but something where it's like, build your own, Winget distribution point. And so that you can basically post your approved and sanctioned version of the apps. I thought that would be something where the Azure, because to me, that's something that it makes sense. But I guess the flip side of that is that it's like, well, wouldn't that then start potentially or be seen as a competitor to the app catalog in Intune? What's the Intune Premium?
Enterprise.
Yeah. So there's, but it's something where for an org that wants full control, as opposed to picking from a list that Microsoft controls, that was something that I don't know why I expected it to be the case. I think I was just, occasionally I show bouts of optimism and then I get smacked down and just become a pessimist again for a while.
We could probably talk about that a bit off the record a bit later. There's some stuff I was poking around in.
But I think that's one thing that I expected with Winget was sort of the ability similar to any Linux-based package manager.
Private repository.
Yeah, just whack any list you want in there from any source, internal or not, so that you can get the best of both worlds. But I guess not yet.
The PR for auth did land like a month ago finally, so that might help a bit because for a long time you just couldn't do auth on Winget servers. That blocked a bunch of people. That's finally available, but I don't know any servers that actually support it other than the official deployment, and that's like super complicated.
So I think this is definitely something that we'll have to revisit, because there's still, I think every time we sort of get into the Winget or even Winget via Microsoft Store, etc., there's still a lot of questions that we don't have great answers to yet. Or in other words, there are certain features that we may be expecting that may not be there yet.
So the idea of the Azure storage stuff though is interesting, because I wouldn't say it happens all the time, but it happens enough to be noticeable. But you'll look at an app that failed to install and it's failed to retrieve content for whatever reason. So the potential of just downloading like a 2 kilobyte file because it's a script and it's just pulling something over Azure storage, is potentially more reliable. I don't know.
Yeah, but then the worry is, and that's similar with using Winget heavily now, is that without changing your Intune tier or whatever else, I would argue that everything listed there and everything available in the dropdown is best practice, right? To a degree, it's offered, so you could use it however you want, right?
Yeah.
But then dealing with Winget, I guess I would say, while it's official, right? It's like, over version 1. Still, I don't know, it feels risky to lean into it when it could otherwise be integrated better later on. Stick with just Win32.
When that team solves the issues with running the PowerShell module on the system, I think that will open things up a bit more. Because we've all got our little custom parsers, which parse for text output, and just doesn't feel robust.
Yeah, I agree.
So just a proposal then, maybe for next month or whatever suits. Do either or both of you want to do a Winget piece?
Yeah,
because I don't think we've done Winget officially for a while. So
For a while.
it's always good to have some topics in the pipeline when we've got somebody in the room who makes a commitment to it.
Yeah. We do use it fairly extensively for safe apps and stuff like that. as I said, it's not without its issues, especially with apps that use permalinks and things like that, where the hash gets out of date. But by and large, it does help cheaply with an issue where you just build a machine and you know it's going to get the latest or close to latest version. So.
Okay, so anything else then on Win32 apps? Like, so based on the lack of, well, very few comments, is it safe to assume then that people are just basically just using, Win32 option in Intune, and as far as deploying, not updating. Now, I guess we then, we still have issues where, sometimes, some of the, well, depending on how you're doing things, dependencies can still be a bit more of an issue. So does anyone have, any kind of, ways that, either whether you think it's creative or whether you think it's something that just works, your approach to dealing with underlying dependencies for what you're installing? So dependencies have been solved. Excellent.
Just about. The good thing with the Win32 stuff is that even if it's just an MSI, like it does give you the exposure to the dependencies and supersedents, and it allows you to. I've seen people do like these monolithic scripts, but actually installing 6 things at once and to deliver an outcome. It gets you away from that, where you can actually see the install structure. Of course, you can chain it appropriately, and it means you can freely update a dependency within the chain if you need to also. But yeah, I've found it's very robust. It does what it needs to do. The only thing I hate is if you've got an app and it depends on another app, you can't delete that app until you break the dependency, which is a bit silly to me. If it was the underlying app, I would understand that, but not when it's the top of the tree.
Okay, now I'm wondering, what were all the questions that people had last month that we didn't get to? That
I actually think it was really around the M365 apps and whether you do that as Win32 or you use the CSP.
Well, that's a perfect starting point for the next slide.
That's a good segue.
Now, I came up with a new abbreviation up there. M365 apps for B&E, for business and enterprise.
I was going to say for bacon and eggs.
Yeah,
break and enter. Yeah, that's what I was seeing that going. Yeah,
I went
break and
straight
enter.
food.
There's one scenario that you don't have there, Mark.
Go to the Office portal and click install.
No. Use the OS on the factory image. Use the M365 on the factory image.
Which one? One of the 5 languages that are pre-installed on my Microsoft Surface device?
But you'd still basically be wanting to push one out and then have it just converted into whatever it needs and pull.
Converts when it's activated.
Activation, yeah.
So it converts on activation.
I was covering that one for the Win365 at least, because you have an option out there. Rather than doing it here, you can, from the marketplace itself, it gives you an option. So I'll cover that.
With the Win365, we have optimized it as well.
Exactly. That's the additional advantage out there.
Yeah.
Images optimize for the Win365 and AVD as well.
Because more and more what we're seeing are customers just using M365 that's baked on the device.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's got 5 languages, but what does it matter? It's kept up to date.
Yeah.
And I don't need to sling out 600 meg for every computer or a gig for every computer and add half an hour to my build time.
The thing is, though, if you want to do that, because there is sometimes going to be times where you're building a machine and it doesn't have it on there.
It's rare.
It's rare. So if you did have the CSP version configured, it's going to install irrespective because it's not installed unless the CSP installs it. So
there's various ways you can mitigate it. So if you do like the template version of M365, that's always going to install no matter what. It just goes on running. But if you go and use like Win32 with detection method, it's going to say, well, do I already have it there? Yes. I'm fine. And what you can do with the Win32 one is you can put a if older than this version and update. If you wanted to go down that route as well, because that's the other thing that we see with customers that are using the factory build is it's too out of date, so it doesn't have XYZ feature, and we want to force it to update. So what they'll do is they'll send out an update by Win32.
More readily lets you avoid update rings and create your own too by turning off auto updates and only deploying updates when you want.
Yeah.
Which, let's see that.
Okay, so I guess then that kind of means then if we sort of look at the M365 app deployment, like we're either going to be leveraging like the native CDN for the M365 bits, or we're going to be using another CDN for the Intune Win32 bits.
Yeah.
And either way, both of them support DO, so that's the tick on the box.
Yeah.
I still find there's still people who resist DO, and a lot of it goes back to the early days of DO where it was unleashed on them without them understanding that they needed to configure it.
Yeah.
And things like, oh, DO kills my Wi-Fi network. And it's like, well, you've either got clients doing the job well, or you've got a crappy Wi-Fi network, or some combination of the two. So some of the other options, or the fourth option that I've got on there, this is one that I used to see a lot, thankfully, or variations of this. Thankfully, I don't anymore, which was when people were more bandwidth constrained than they are now, where they basically would set up, they basically run your Office setup / download on a file share or whatever they had, and then they'd basically be pushing a script down, or originally they're like, oh no, they wouldn't even push a script down via Intune to point to that. They'd just be doing it manually. And it's like, if you have to follow, if that's the approach you want to take, at least learn a bit more about Intune and some PowerShell so that you can start automating it as new clients come on board.
Yeah.
You can sort of point them to that. Now, one of the issues that I just saw time and time again with this approach was, well, first of all, DO would have dealt with it. So it shouldn't have been, it's something that, that they, like, unless the network team was saying, oh, that's something we don't want. But it was normal. I'd say overall, it's probably more of an ignorance thing. They just weren't aware. But the other thing that I saw repeatedly with this was people would put in the UNC path for the installation point, but then forget to delete the update path. And they just use the same, they'd be pointing the update path to the UNC, as opposed to just letting it go out to the CDN to get the updates. So people were basically deploying it and it wasn't getting updates. And it got worse than that because their deployment shares were temporary. So basically, it's not even like they could have fixed it by updating the source. It was just gone.
Yeah.
So that was something where I kind of understand people wanting to do it initially to do big rollouts, etc. But the thing that I'd always come back and say is if you were using DO, your rollouts would be faster than that, because as the peer swarm starts to grow, it is, and if you sort of came along to the last Sydney session or the last Sydney Workplace Ninjas, where I was doing some demos, sort of showing just how quickly a swarm can deliver the M365 apps to a client device. Like if you're not putting any controls in place, or if you're doing things like enabling leadback to make sure that it's maximizing bandwidth usage, you're basically pushing it out. Easily saturate gigabit network connection. Maybe you want to put some throttling in a Wi-Fi environment, but if you're doing mass deployments and you're not, mass deployments of things that are 3 gig in size, like some Ethernet cables can be quite useful for speeding these things up. But otherwise, like the other thing where we used to see, not the offline deployment option, but where we used to see people doing things with PowerShell was, I think before the Win32 app option opened up in Intune, people who had a bad experience with the M3, or it was probably when it was still Office 365 Pro Plus, just to put the time frame into perspective. People were having issues with just delays or it not just taking forever to install. Yeah. And so people would go, we're just going to do it through PowerShell. It's more consistent.
Yeah.
I just don't see, like, unless somebody's sticking to that because they were burnt 5 or 6 years ago, like, I just don't see people
They paid a
doing,
consultant to put it in 5 years
Yeah.
ago and haven't actually
Yeah.
updated it.
and it works, but the problem there that I still see, that I still think of there is that it's, just something that you just don't need to do that much. I'm not saying that you delete, don't delete that script, but just, make sure it's not assigned to anyone, use the appropriate ways to do it. And if you ever need to resort, you can always go back and do it. And it's not all that complicated to create a simple PowerShell script that deploys Office for you, or so M365 apps.
I think my main gripe, to be honest, and the only one I really have, because we're small, like 500 people, so we never really hit many limits. But it's the lack of, so for deployments, it's no problem because, pumps it on, new device, no one's on it, it's a machine-based deploy. But the problem then is when you have someone who wants a different package or for whatever reason needs to switch back architectures, there's no interface to tell them, hey, you have that open, and you tell a user, but they're just going to sit there for like an hour and wait. So packaging is Win32 with PS App Deploy Toolkit or something, give a GUI in place, and like that's the main motivator. Is really just the lack of interactivity for a user when you need to install like Visio or Access or something. That sucks.
Yeah. I think that's the thing. So, I mean, I would use the configuration designer until I can't. So, brand new deployment, and I've got no dependencies on Office, like no particular plugins that are old and they just need Office installed. It's fine. But until it's not fine, that's when I will probably look at a Win32. And when it's not fine is when someone who has just changed the config and all of a sudden it's got a 90% failure rate because it can never update on the device. Normally, I'll just get rid of it because I don't like the sight of it, and then it goes to a Win32 where I can control the detection. But I always start out optimistically and then.
Yeah, and I guess like as simple as configuration designer is, the only time I'm not using it is if I want to push out the beta build, the insider builds. That's the only time I don't do it. Because I'm not, like, it's pretty simple options, but that's, 99% of the time, that's what you're going to need there. And then probably just the other piece there is if you do actually, whenever you do have to create, your own custom XML to paste in to Intune, start off with something that is being generated by config.office.com, as opposed to handcrafting something from scratch. And one of the reasons why I say that is it's my way of telling you to occasionally go back to config.office.com and maybe see if there's any other anything else that's being exposed through that richer version of the configuration designer that you might go, oh, this might be something that's actually useful for us to include. But if you're just using the same, XML files for years because you haven't really had to change them. So even though the channel names have changed, et cetera, over time, like I think Monthly Enterprise is the only one that's actually like a net new.
Yeah.
Like what used to be like Insider Fast is now beta. Insider Slow, you can still type in Insider Slow, but that's just going to be current channel preview.
Yeah.
So any of you who've worked with these for years, that the old naming for things is in there forever. So you've got like Groove is my favorite one, choosing what not to install. The Groove client, not Groove, not the Groove that became Xbox Music. But Groove, the duct tape and twine based SharePoint synchronization tool.
You must zoom in between Groove Music and.
Oh yeah. Okay, so otherwise, then any other questions here around this, or like just so I guess just to get some feedback, is everyone just sort of finding that generally just using the configuration designer in Intune to pick from, whatever basic settings you need. So what would you be choosing? The apps, the architecture, the channel, and maybe a particular build? Like, but even there with the build, for me, that's really more of a crap has hit the fan and you need to test something. You think there's a change that's been implemented that you didn't see before or something. But even there, like, like showing, like demoing rolling back and forth between builds was like a common thing in the early days of click to run.
Yeah.
But it's just not something that I've seen implemented.
I haven't really seen an Office update for things for a while, or anything like that. The biggest complaints I get if Office updates too fast or too hot is the C-level exec where the mail and calendar buttons are on the left and down the bottom or something like that. That only grubs, but they're not issues and such. They're just, pencack.
Well, they accidentally open up new Outlook.
Yeah, well, that happens too. Yeah,
We'll keep that.
Sorry, you mean Outlook, right? Not Outlook Classic? Is that what? We're not there yet? Okay.
I'm not ready for that.
No one is. Yeah, I've got to say though, I've lent into that. I've been using new Outlook for like ages now, but I am a very uncomplicated man on my computer, whereas other people seem to really struggle with it. So I don't know. See how that goes.
Yeah, there's something called drag and drop
Mm.
that I really love using,
Works now.
but it across tenants.
Oh yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, like
Also-
I know my use case isn't a normal commercial use case, so but it would be a normal consumer use case.
It also depends where you drag and drop it to. Some just work like to your desktop. That's cool,
Yeah.
but to another app might give you a download link.
Nice.
Just
I'm
say,
going to try that. I haven't tried that.
yeah, I literally today after a while. So
Okay, so in that case, it just seems like seeing that we're not getting any reports of issues or people doing anything too crazy around this. I think for now, I'll switch over to you, Aresh, so you can now talk about, I guess similar things here, but for Win365 and AVD.
Sure. If you can stop sharing and I can plug in the.
I'll just share over the top.
Yeah, just share. That'll kick me out.
Oh, share.
Yeah.
Okay, let's get in. We had good talks about the devices. Now, just going to go further, narrowed down, focusing the same app delivery, however, in context to Windows 365 and AVD in general. What I always like to do whenever we are talking about Windows 365 and AVD, I always like to give a comparison. By definition, Windows 365 is an end-to-end SaaS platform, managed, maintained, hosted in Microsoft within Azure. And all you have to do is just click few buttons here and there and fill a form. And after that, you have a desktop ready to go. It's a one-to-one desktop. And essentially all the aspects and the elements of the desktop are managed through the Intune portal. From an admin perspective, if you're familiar with Intune, you can probably manage the Windows 365 like a breeze. And pricing wise, very predictable pricing. There is a fixed cost per user per month. So you know what you're going to pay at the end of the month. On the other side, Azure Virtual Desktop is a more enterprise grade solution where you need lots of flexibility and control over your applications. That's where you would go down the path of Azure Virtual Desktop. You probably control and manage all the aspects of the Azure Virtual Desktop through the Azure portal. And then you can have further integrations with partners like Nerdio, VMware, Citrix. You can have something similar integrations of Windows 365 as well with Nerdio, VMware, and Citrix. It gives you granular control. Azure Virtual Desktop allows you to turn the bibs and bobs on of each and an individual feature, which you typically don't see in Windows 365. But give or take, I would say it's pretty comparable. My argument would be, why would you want that bibs and bobs to be playing with at the first place. Is it like an admin overhead which you want to take up? And from a pricing perspective, it's pay as you go, unfortunately. So there's no way to determine how much your Azure bill is going to be at the end of the month. It is absolutely on consumption basis, and you will have to go down the rabbit hole of saving or doing cost optimization at some point in time. There are multiple options over there as well. You can do a single desktop, you can do a multi-user desktop, or you can just offer apps. What I have seen in the market where, especially in the enterprise segment, people are doing both, where if you want a desktop, people are going down the route of Windows 365, giving you a one-to-one desktop. If you want apps on top of it, people are delivering apps through Azure Virtual Desktop remote app. And that's essentially under the hood multi-session. So essentially they're using the multi-session pooled multi-session host and delivering just apps outcome using AVD. So it's the best of both the worlds. You're offering a full-blown virtual desktop, as well at the same time, you're offering them apps through the remote app, which is much more cost-effective with that particular model to deliver apps.
So the Azure Virtual Desktop, though, can they be, say, for an company entirely on-prem? Not entirely on-prem. Would they be able to domain join that, though? Whereas you can't domain join a Windows 365.
You can.
You can?
You can.
Okay, cool.
Hybrid join.
No, but
hybrid AD.
yeah, hybrid join. Yeah, cool. Okay. Oh, cool. I didn't realize.
Yes.
AVD, you can do straight up domain join.
Yeah.
Windows 365, you have to do hybrid.
Mhm.
You have no choice.
Yeah, sorry, that's sort of what I meant. Yeah, so AVD does give, I guess, companies might be forced into that if they are.
Yeah,
not
That's
that.
right.
Because AVD, you can manage it without Intune, whereas Windows 365, you must manage with Intune.
Intune. You also have an option to do AVD and Intune as well.
Yeah.
So there are certain benefits of that as well, but
Caveats associated.
Yeah. Quite a bit of limitations come into the picture. That's the reason.
Depending on the SKU.
Yeah, exactly.
And that would be comparable to like AWS workspaces.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. Cool.
Yes, indeed.
So,
Yeah.
The biggest difference where you look at with AVD from a management point of view with Intune is if you're using like a one-to-one OS, Intune will manage it without any problems. When you get to multi-session, Intune will manage parts of it, but not all of it. And then when you get to the server OS, Intune won't manage it at all.
Yeah.
It will be, all you'll be able to do is dependent patching via Intune.
That's right.
Or dependent management via Intune.
Cool. So the biggest use cases around AVD would be the multi-session, which is the number one use case why it's more popular now, is the multi-session host that to Windows 11 edition. And that edition, you can't get it anywhere else. Within other than Azure, that edition does not exist that you can download a copy for your Hyper-V running on-prem or anything like that. You can't do that, but you could do a mix with Azure Stack HCI. So you can extend the Azure through the Azure Stack. So you have an on-premise, so your compute is running on-premise, but having an extension with Azure Stack. So in that sense, you could still use multi-session, but in general, that multi-session SKU is not available outside of Azure. Any questions on the comparison? Does anyone agree or disagree that people are using both Windows 365 and AVD together?
I'd actually be curious as well to see who is actually using them at all. Like, how many, because like, again, my experience is a smaller org and we have like 5 AWS workspaces because all of our servers are in our EC2s. And that's the only reason we chose it, because we're not embedded within Azure. But yeah, I'm curious to see like how many people are using, I guess.
Many. I can tell you enterprise customers
Yeah.
are using it
Hmm.
heavily.
Yeah, actually, in
terms-
saying that, we do have a Citrix environment that we're getting rid of at the moment, but that was exactly as you described, where the Citrix workplace and all the apps there are listed, as well as
That's right.
shared desktop. So I can see it as a great replacement for that.
And I think, and where I think some of this comes from in terms of, like curiosity about, is it being used? If you're not like in the world of VDI, etc., it's like, it's one of those things where if you're not involved in that world, it exists. But
Yeah.
you just don't realize how big it actually is.
Yes.
And even for me, when AV, or when it was still being called WVD, when it was announced, and there are a couple of people whose opinions I trust that I sort of ran into at the same time and said, I don't get it. Why are people so excited about WVD? And I'm like, what's so special about it? And they're like, is RDS or whatever something you have a great amount of passion for? And I said, hell no. And they're like, that's all. It's like, people who are looking for that next thing, the way to, to take that, take that technology that they've been stuck with on-prem, move it to the cloud. That was really, that was the big exciting piece. So yes, like the PaaS components, Microsoft handling a lot of the underlying elements of it for you. Obviously, that was nice as well, but it was just that there was a solution that was the exciting piece to begin with.
Agreed.
And then all of a sudden, and even there, like something that an event that I was involved with recently, even on the Win365 side, like there were people asking, like, why on earth would you use Win365? Why wouldn't you just give them a laptop? And basically, it was the same thing where, because their world has never involved RDS or Citrix or whatever, they just don't realize that that's a whole industry, a whole industry in the industry that they're part of, that they just don't have any exposure to.
That's correct. Indeed. And contractor use case, which is so popular around for us. And essentially for contractor use case, Windows 365 or AVD works very well. This way, you're not exposing any of your proprietary stuff onto the contractor's endpoint, and everything is lock and loaded, because you can put a lot of configuration policies around clipboarding and all of that onto your Windows 365 and AVD. That way you can control what is getting exposed.
Yeah, that's exactly our use case for AWS workspaces. Yeah, I did try and suggest Win365, but I think the cost was a little prohibitive for some of the workloads some of the contractors were doing, versus a sort of more shared model in AVD, for their consumption. But I honestly don't know if they could have predicted how much they were going to spend in AWS, because again, it's consumption based. But it wasn't my decision.
Agreed.
But also, either way, cool to see it anyway. I would love to work with Win365 stuff.
It is indeed, like, I would say I would like to share an experience around. I've come from different vendor platforms, worked intensively for many years. So let me break down an example why PaaS is so important in an aspect. Most of the vendors these days come out with 4 updates a year. Okay, 4 updates every quarter. And essentially, if you were to do 4 updates plus security vulnerability updates that come out throughout the year. So give or take, an average is 6 updates you're typically doing per year at least, if you want to be on N, provided you want to be on N. If N-1, give or take 2 updates plus all the vulnerabilities that you're patching across. Now, multiply that effort with the number of pods that you have in an enterprise. Like if it's a large scale customer, you would at least have 3 pods. Now imagine, multiply that ratio of 3 pods with 6 updates. I have seen full-on teams just working on updates throughout the years. That's it. Nothing else. It's like their whole job is just to keep it patched, updated throughout, because once they would finish the dev, then they would do prod 1, then again another prod 2, prod 3. By the time they finish prod 3, new update is already in the market. And you just rinse and repeat that whole cycle plus 0-day on your equation. Hence, pass saves you a lot of time. And that's why if you were to ask me between even AVD and Windows 365, you don't even see lots of components, which is under the hood. I feel Windows 365 does use AVD as well, but that's under the hood. And then still Microsoft does a lot of heavy lifting on top to just give you smaller bits of components to play around with and makes your management overhead much lesser. So tying the app delivery for Windows 365. The way I've placed the slides is in the order of the most popular and the most common one. So the most common one, the app delivery method for your Windows 365 is through Windows App Win32 apps.
Just quickly, sorry. Tom had his hand up before for a question, but
sorry, Tom.
Kept talking.
Oh, good. It was just around the differences on the admin side with Win365. That's the draw we're starting to see with a lot of customers who they look at AVD, it's really complicated, so they end up having to buy a third-party management solution, and then they're like, we're paying the same amount as Win365 anyway. May as well. Has AVD gotten any less complex? It's been a good 2 years since I've touched it.
No, not at all. Not less
Okay.
complex. In fact, once in the Q&A, I'll give more flavor to this conversation and give you more details. In fact, now you even need storage if you want to do AVD. You need a storage guy who does storage very well, because I'll talk about the app delivery and the modern app delivery through app attach. And the app attach stuff, all the MSIX packages and everything sitting on a storage. And the storage is probably Azure storage. And then now you have to manage it. Probably you also have to do private endpoint. You don't want that storage to be exposed. Lots of things. So it is hardcore Azure. You definitely need Azure SREs in your team if you're doing AVD. Because not only you would not want to do it through the portal, you probably want to do it through some form of automation, through Bicep or through Terraform. In addition, automating all that stuff. So definitely, Tom, awesome point, and we'll park it, and I'll probably give more insights later in the Q&A.
Yeah, thanks.
Bringing up to the app delivery, the most popular being Win32, and in Win32, why the new modern touch within the Win32 is, so let's talk about the traditional touch first and then the modern touch. The traditional touch being most of the enterprise grade customers would have an app packaging factory involved. When Win32 apps were required, though through PowerShell, but what I'm trying to emphasize is that they would typically have some form of an app packaging factory, which would give the customized bundle of that app for you in an Intune Win format, and you intake that particular format and put it in your clients. However, what has changed recently is not having to package each and every app in that shape and form, and instead use Winget. And what that is bringing to the table is that most of the apps fall under the category of Winget. I'm not talking about the store apps of Winget, the Winget repository where it's much more wider than the Microsoft Store one. So, and there are some pointers as to some great open source tools or some community tools that have come up, which can get you the Winget based package in Intune Win format for you. So probably if there is more interest, we should do a session in the future, like dedicated on that, how to get a package done using one of those tools. Moving on. The other popular version is through the store apps. This is always been like a hit and miss, because the repo doesn't have everything that an enterprise would need. So you would always have Win32 apps plus these. A lot of new apps are coming give or take, and the new edition of the Win32 apps in the store, and that repository is greatly increasing day by day. So I see some time in the future with UWP and Win32 apps coming to the Microsoft Store, probably this option being probably overridden and becoming number one, because more and more Win32 apps starts showing up over here.
Yeah.
It becomes much more easier. You don't need anything else. You don't have to package. You don't have to do even the WinGet Intune Win package using WinGet, though it makes it much more easier.
Yeah.
But if it's over here, it's just a click after that.
Yeah, I find the versions though in the Microsoft Store app new to be slightly behind sometimes the actual WinGet's native repo, which can be frustrating.
100%.
You don't get the dependencies either. I don't know if anyone else has seen this. I was doing Citrix Workspace as a Microsoft Store app using the Win32, and this was a few months ago, but I couldn't work out why my Intune builds were failing. It was exiting with 3010, indicating an MSI reboot, but the mechanism was considering any non-zero exit code of failure. So it was constantly failing my build, and I ended up having to just do it with WinGet or something.
I see.
Maybe it's fixed, I don't know, but it was an interesting one.
Not worth trying again, to be honest.
It was a Win32, right?
It was a Win32 app, and yeah, it was installing successfully. And I could see in the Intune management extension logs or the agent executor that it was successful. It was successful in the sense that it exited with a good code like 3010, but Intune considered it a fail because it was a non-zero code. It didn't factor in a reboot code from MSI exec. So
I see.
yeah,
Yeah, that's always the caveat. Nothing is. So Microsoft Store apps is probably becoming more and more popular, provided more and more Win32 apps start showing up. And the latest addition, the Enterprise App Catalog. So I have a PowerShell script. I ran it yesterday for this session just to check what's the count of apps right now. I think, Steve, we've come a long way. I think from couple of sessions back, it was 200 or something around that. Now, yesterday's count is 451 apps in the Enterprise App Catalog. And what essentially this is, it's a Microsoft's managed catalog with all the apps they've put in. And this is only applicable if you buy the Intune suite of license. So it's an add-on. So if you probably are buying the Intune suite, which is like a no-brainer right now with the remote help and all of that included in the package, you get access to the Enterprise App Catalog. And the Enterprise App Catalog has tried-tested applications in the catalog, around 451 as of yesterday.
What's the delivery mechanism?
It just puts them into your tenant as Win32 apps.
Win32 apps.
So
But who builds them as Win32 apps? And
all good questions.
so yeah,
Steve,
Fred,
that's why I meant.
you know,
yeah.
Fred does.
Oh.
You know Fred?
No.
Well, me neither.
Yeah.
His or her name may be Fred.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see.
No, so basically it's even for somebody who sort of is trying to sort of learn a bit more about publishing apps through Win32, kicking off a trial of this and going through and seeing what options they're putting in. Now, not necessarily saying that everything they're doing is a best practice, because if I say that, someone's going to find something in there that proves me wrong. But for people who are sort of trying to figure out, what are the command line switches I really should be using? What should I be putting in about error, the reporting, etc. So they basically just fully populate a Win32 app. So because this is the thing that I was curious about, thinking again, going back to DO, is this something that is going to respect DO? And it's like, so as soon as I sort of saw the way that it worked, it was like, oh, okay. And then I was just sort of watching resource monitor, and just your normal Intune distribution points were being used.
Yeah, and well, the reason I ask is because I was wondering if the onus was put on the provider of the publisher of the app to actually package it and provide it to Microsoft, because that I see as the benefit of WinGet is you get their raw installer, which is sort of on them to maintain. Okay.
Steam
That
is
is
probably
a-
quiet, no
As much
expert
as
comments
Microsoft
on
has
it.
got, like the ISP teams who
Not my
works with
area.
them,
Right.
trying to dictate how they do things has never been something that's gone well.
Yeah, which I totally get.
Otherwise, everyone would have had MSI deployments 20 years ago.
Yeah.
We got very close to everybody being on MSI, and then we brought out AppV, AppX, and MSIX.
So this is a great segue. If you have a license, you have a catalog of Microsoft verified, tested applications in a catalog, which you can choose from. As you can tell from the number itself, it's not extensive, unfortunately, but it's an add-on. You should not if you're just aiming to buy the Intune suite just for this is probably not worth it, but there is lots of goodness in the Intune suite is what you're getting it for. And this is an add-on that you get on top of it. So this is an ever-changing catalog number. As I said, we were joking a couple of sessions back. I think the number was somewhere around 200 or 300. Probably in a couple of months from now, we've already reached 451. And if anyone is interested on the API call on how to see happy to share that. That's how I got the number. It's not I've made up.
Even though it's only 451, you'd probably find it's pretty good. Like I was doing a Mac deployment with Jamf, and they've got a catalog of probably similar size. About 80% of what I needed was there.
Right.
So I'd imagine it's the same there as well. They're probably all there for out of demand.
I can also see it fulfilling a skills deficit for a lot of companies that can't afford someone with the skill set to maintain and deploy these too. So I can see it being quite useful. So.
And slides. I'll come to this slide, but probably there's an order problem. So what is the benefit of these? There's a additional benefit of using an app from the catalog. Whenever you select an app, like on the left-hand side, I have a screenshot for Audacity, the audio software. It says the app is self-updating. So if the enterprise app catalog also has most of the apps in this category where they do auto update by itself. So you don't have the headache of updating the app thereafter, provided you've picked it up from the catalog and the catalog calls it out like this. When you sit, like, for example, I had another screenshot of Adobe something that was Adobe or something else, which was not auto updating. So it would not say anything. But if you picked an app which was auto updating, it will give you a message that the app is self updating. So that's another advantage that if you've picked an app from the enterprise app catalog, it's self updating. Now, what if the app is not self updating? Then there is another option within the app blade called as update for Windows Win32 catalog apps. And it'll show you all the apps and the versions here, and you can probably do the update from here. But it does show you. Now, for some odd reason, though I have the enterprise app catalog license, I can't see this blade. So in the entire slides, this is the only screenshot that I had to borrow from someone else's.
I've got it here.
See, there you go. Yeah. He has it, but in my tenant, some odd reason, I don't see this blade. But nonetheless, this is your go-to blade. If you've had an app from the app catalog and it didn't do auto update, this is where you would probably go for seeing and doing the update. And probably you can click the 3 dots and there are options over there to do the update from.
That's a crazy amount of debt Microsoft are going into, like you're like effort-wise, to then grow and maintain this and repackage them, unless there's some funky pipeline.
You've got Jamf's catalog. Base one has its own catalog.
Yeah, you have to plan for it, right? Yeah, that's true.
Topic around M365 apps. Now, the way I would position this one because remember, I'm talking a slightly narrow focus on Windows 365 and AVD. So I would say you don't have to do M365 apps from Intune. Basically, you have the option when you're creating the provisioning policy for Windows 365 to select the image.
Now, I have seen customers who unfortunately don't use Microsoft 365, so they don't select that particular option. However, if you are reliant on the Office suite, just select it here. This bakes in the Office suite inside your image, and it's highly optimized for Windows 365. So what I'm trying to say is that all the optimizations which are required for a VDI are done and carried out as a best practice for you as an image. So you don't have to do any of those people coming from prehistoric when it was not SAS and PAS. There were scripts on the community done, which you had to run as optimizations on each and every image before you lock and seal those images for rollouts. This is done for you. So pick a version with the 365 apps built in rather than delivering it ad hoc.
In the context or on that list, sorry, what is OS optimizations? Like, what is that specifically?
So basically, if you did VDI for anyone else, even for Microsoft had a Git repository with optimizations would be like disabling screensaver, disabling this, disabling that, disabling all additional service on a Windows operating system which are not used. So those are all your optimizations in general to keep VDI efficient enough and consume less resources.
Another example is setting OneDrive to online mode.
Yeah.
Because why do I need to sync it if it's always going to be sitting in a data center?
Yeah, it makes a ton of sense.
Office files.
And you can't blend the two. You can't have OS optimizations plus Microsoft 365. You got to pick one or the other. Like if you go back to your.
Oh no. So if you select
this one,
the Enterprise and M365, they're both optimized.
Optimize.
So
Right.
Okay. It's a layer.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. Okay. Cool.
So essentially, if you pick the one which I've highlighted, it's already optimized.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I've also seen customers who don't use M365, and then they pick the Enterprise 11 plus optimize.
Yeah. Okay. It's amazing. Thank you.
Okay. So what else? One of our mates would have been here, would have felt very happy that I've included his stuff. Third-party software catalogs, the most extensive that I have seen on anybody is Patch My PC. Amazing, amazing choice. In fact, if time permits and demo, they also do updates. So I have two screenshots from my own my own software. One is if you select an app in the catalog, it auto selects it for the updates. So what happens is after that, you don't have to maintain the versions. So in my tenant and in my example, if at all we go to demos, there's Postman. I've just selected Postman as a choice. And now every time an update comes in, it keeps adding the latest version automatically for me. And the app keeps getting updated, auto updated within the tenant, and you don't have to do it manually anymore after that. So call out for this is only because it has an extensive catalog of some 3-4 digit number of apps and very extensive.
Yeah,
that's the reason for the call out. Amazing if this is probably for your Win32 apps. If it's like any public facing and popular app is here. So you probably could use this as an option. Other stuff around some tips, tricks, what I was saying, there is this WinGet Intune, which is a free open source. It's called as WinTuner. However, what this is doing is under the hoods, it has two different flavors. One is a PowerShell module and one is a .NET version. Using this, you can do WinGet packages in Win32. So the output would be Intune Win file. But under the hood, the package sizes are much lesser and you are able to do winget packages. So you're wrapping winget packages for Intune Win32 delivery.
And I guess that's opposed to writing a really solid wrapper for winget in a blank file and then calling it via the install line.
That's right.
That's pretty cool.
This is pretty cool. In fact, that's what I was saying, that we could probably do a community dedicated session. Probably it'll need a lot of labbing and all, a lot of work to get this. But there is a demo on YouTube using .NET version. It is simple. Once installed, just few commands. All you need is the ID. So all you need to grab from winget is the ID. And you can build packages on the fly after that. It even does the logos, icons, and all the details that are needed for the Win32 app for that.
Yeah, that'd be sick.
It pulls everything from winget, which is already published, and brings it in. Okay. The other one, everyone knows, PS App Deploy Toolkit, now probably under Patch My PC. They brought this community tool under them. So amazing stuff. I've put a link even there. So this is a very popular tool to do app packaging in general. This is probably the go-to app packaging, how enterprises were doing app packaging with all the SAPs, clients, and all of that of the world. Now, there is a new flavor, and I put the blog link out there, is it showcases how to do winget packages with PS App Deploy as well, which is probably net new. PS App Deploy and doing MSI-based packages, EXE-based packages, age-old of automating Win32 apps, but there is a new flavor for winget as well. Now, between the two, if you ask me currently, I'm more impressed with the WinTuner if you're doing winget packages, much more simpler, just one-liner, and you can get the packages done as an output.
Wait, sorry. So just with WinTuner, you're saying, does it just write a wrapper so that what you're deploying is a tiny script to the device, or does it actually pull down and install to like some temp location and package that?
Just the wrapper.
Ah, cool.
Just the wrapper.
Okay.
I've got a modified version of it that does pull down the full version, but I don't think there's anything public on that at the moment.
Lovely, Tom. That's a good
That's
one.
a recent winget feature that's pretty handy, yeah. Because it handles the DO and caching, and it also pulls dependencies.
Yeah, winget download, yeah.
Yeah.
That's cool. So that's about the tips and tricks around this. Last wrapping up for Windows 365 before we jump into the AVD is there's often a debate, especially in Win365, is that a lot of people or a lot of customers demand that I don't want to roll out the image without the apps being installed on it. And how do you do that? These are certain best practices, and there's one awesome number in that particular blog as well. So you assign applications to the devices. That's how you quickly don't assign it to the user, because what the challenge, but the only exception, don't assign it to the user only if the app is forcefully needs a user context for licensing, then you can't dodge this. You can't assign it to the device, obviously. But if that's not the problem, assign it to the device, use filters. In Win365, you can use filters. Yes, Steve.
So you're saying to use the all devices group and then device filters for deployments of applications and configurations in sight of the recent events where applications were being pushed out without being fully vetted, we'll say. Do you still think that that's a good idea, or are you looking to move to ring-based deployments for apps and configurations for your devices?
So this context right now for my discussion was not around day 2. This advice and best practice right now from Microsoft is more around day 0, day 1 kind of deployments where people are in a situation where you have to give out 3,000 desktops. And the customer has a requirement that I don't want to hand out desktops without the apps. I want the user to be productive the minute he logs on to the desktop Windows 365 especially is what I'm calling out. So they want the user to be productive. And if you have these requirements where you want all the apps to be present and not present after the user logs in, is when you have to do this best practice. In this best practice, you can do MD, all of those other, like your security software. It doesn't have to be MD, but your security software, other things can go as day one, assigned to device, and further filtered through. So probably the filter is, if we get to the demo, I'll show you, I have a filter set up for cloud PCs, and it just targets that.
I understand that. So for day one support or day two support, at what point do you change your deployment from all devices to ring-based deployment?
In the current issue that we've seen now that we know what can happen at scale, it is advisable to do it in a phase ring-based manner, because
Can we save the ring
yes,
conversation?
we
for
have
the next
slides for
section?
that.
Yeah,
Exactly,
yeah,
we
yeah.
have the slides for that.
Yeah, we'll
Yeah.
park that.
Yeah, we have a full-on set, like a slide deck on that topic. So
Everything has its place. Don't mix
Yeah.
streams.
So there is a very interesting statistic around this. So Microsoft now with Win365 can get a lot of insights, which through the scale they can see. So in that particular research, it showcased that 30% of the user base don't even use the desktop within the 4 hours after it gets provisioned. And
Sure.
that's a significant, if you look at it from an angle, like you get an email that you have a desktop. Most of the users don't even touch it before it's 4 hours. And after 4 hours, they'll probably log in.
Well, and the people that care the most about how quick a computer builds typically are going to be your IT admins, IT leadership, and pain in the ass customers. That's it.
That's it.
And they typically make up less than 10% of your organization.
Totally.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll hand a new user their like replacement device or whatever, and they'll just stay on their other one for like a week. Like, if you moved over yet, you open it, like, no, I haven't touched it.
Yeah, but that's where you say I'm taking your computer at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You just have to take control.
Well, the device, you don't need the old device anymore because everything's copied over automatically for you because you've done OneDrive no folder move, you've got ESR turned on, and all of your apps are coming from a centralized location. Why do you need to do anything with your old computer?
Yes.
Do you spend that long with your phone? Anyway.
These are logical things that you're saying.
Yes. The other alternative is you turn around and go,
I'll give it to someone else.
Your laptop got stolen overnight. Sorry.
No worries. Now the segue into AVD. AVD is a different beast altogether. You probably could deploy apps through Intune onto your multi-session host, provided the context level has to be system or user something. System. But is it required? And that's the reason you don't have that option in none of my slides that I'm talking about. It is an option. And I didn't want it to like highlight it that this is a go-to option in any shape or form, because it's not a great idea to do it because you don't know. It's a very uncertain way of doing things. So how people are doing apps in AVD. This is the most popular way of doing apps. You create a golden image, that too from the store. So creating a golden image here is not that you're installing the operating system. Take the Microsoft Gallery image, take that in, and now install all the apps after you've taken that image, whatever security software, any other enterprise apps that have to go in to that host pool, deploy all of that, seal it, put it in the Azure Compute Gallery, It will auto replicate to the region of your choice. So there's high availability. Typically, if you're doing active passive or active active, you probably are dealing with two regions and you want the gallery image to be present in the other. If a DR was invoked, you have the image in the other site as well. So that's the reason behind, and Azure Compute Gallery does the replication for you. This is the most popular way of delivering apps in AVD. Now, there could be a question around how do you segregate the apps? And unfortunately, back in the day, there used to be something called as application assessment. I think it's not a thing anymore where people literally undergo months to derive which 20 best applications work hand in hand the best together. And typically another vendor's farms, if that sounds familiar, the term farms used to get created based on the application assessment carried out. Which 20 best applications work together stay here in farm 1, which other 20 work the best live in farm 2. So they're segregated because you know that there is one app in farm 1 and one app in farm 2, if put together, are not going to work because they need Java version Y, something around that. So that's some history lesson around that. But now that's not a concern anymore. Nobody does application assessment to that degree because it is an intensive operation to justify that amount, that much amount of time and energy and cost. So people, if you want segregated apps, the way I've seen it is take a good SKU in Azure for your VM, a good SKU with 8 CPUs or 16 CPUs and certain amount of RAM, 64 GB, whatever, and you deploy 20 apps. If you want to deploy the other 20 apps, don't put it on that, make it 40, create another host pool and put the remaining apps out there. But there's no magic formula of 20. I've seen some weird stuff. I've seen 35 apps in a host pool and all are getting served. It's not that. And the $1 million question in that is, are you sure all the 35 work? Yeah, they've been working well. So why not?
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So you probably, there's no magic around what goes together. But I would say, give or take, if you're a big enterprise and you're doing like 60 apps delivered in remote apps, 20 each in a host pool is a fair statement. Now, there is another caveat in AVD. It just doesn't end there. Now, if you were talking about user profiling with the apps, then FS Logics kicks in. And FS Logics doesn't span across host pools, unfortunately. So that's another design consideration or a design decision that you have to undertake. How it means you don't want your profiles cannot span across host pools. Hence, you have to put all the apps that are critical from a business unit standpoint in one host pool. So all live in together. And whatever is their day-to-day usage is restricted to that one host pool. That's why that example which I was giving of 35 apps in that one host pool, which sounds a lot like 35 apps on a single VM and multiply that into like 40, 50 VMs, all running 35 apps. So that's one small takeaway that you have to do consideration while you're doing your app design for AVD, especially remote apps. So golden image, the most popular. Then comes in the custom image templates. Now, this is probably the automated way of building images, but custom images. And essentially under the hood, I'm not sure, like earlier it used to be called as image builder, Azure image builder. I don't know whether it used to use Terraform back in the day or Bicep or something under the hood totally.
Packer.
Okay, Packer. I see. Yeah, from HashiCorp. And now it's a wrapper built. so what I'm trying to say is that the original process was super technical, like super. It would probably be like dev level of effort needed to get an image built. Then Microsoft decided to wrap all that heavy lifting and gave you the option inside the Azure portal in Azure Virtual Desktop Blade. So you could do that. Now, what this brings to the table is that you can add your custom steps of your choice within the deployment, which is including apps as well. So you need to build wrappers around PowerShell or preferably PowerShell if you wanted to install apps during the build. So it gives you an option to put all the scripts inside the repository and you can get the images with the apps built. I've seen this getting used, but I think it's a hit and miss. Basically, it needs a little bit of automation skills and SRE skills. So only organizations where they have resources like that, they use this, but it works pretty flawlessly once all the heavy lifting is done. A very repeatable process, probably under the umbrella of infrastructure as a code, if your organizations are keen towards it. Once heavy lifting is done with the coding, you can reuse it with any number of templates thereafter. And this is the screenshot. You can add built-in scripts. So the add built-in scripts is what Microsoft provides. This is what Microsoft gives you. You can do time zone redirection, install the FSLogix client. All these are pre-built options. If you want to do MMR, multimedia redirection, or all, this is built in. And the next plus is add your own script. Add your own script is the place where you would do all your applications. So you could write some PowerShell scripts, upload it onto the storage account, and then it would call it for installing the apps. Provided one big thing, the package has to live on the storage account as well, on Azure storage account, because that's what it's going to call.
And there's a PowerShell script, so you could put like a packer, your own like variables in there for other things, or
you probably have to do everything in the PowerShell script and ensure that the package with all the installed silent installs and all the switches are in your code, and the storage location of the file could live on the storage account.
Sorry, yeah, no, I understand. I thought that potentially took place earlier in building the image itself, as opposed to getting to a desired state of like apps and things. That makes more sense.
So what you can do as well is put it into a build pipeline.
Yes.
In a CI/CD pipeline.
Yeah.
Where it goes off and calls the tasks. Azure DevOps has parts of it built in natively now. And then it just references across. So this is where if you're doing app deployment for these types of things, you want to be able to also have the same content that you're doing for Intune Win. So that's where you build your packaging factory that will go and create the Intune Win file from the same binaries that you're going to use to deploy to your API.
Yeah, single source of truth, right? Yeah, that's mad.
So there's a whole heap of cool automation that you can build around it, but it's
a wormhole.
Yeah, and you need to where it gets complicated / interesting is it comes down to the size and scale of your organization. For a 500 seat organization, if you're running even 10% of your org on AVD, it's not worth it.
No.
But 50,000 seat organization, it becomes very interesting.
Yep. And the last and the unspoken method is the new method app attach. Essentially, what this particular method is that it containerizes the application. So it's basically an MSIX package, a VHD, essentially a VHDX file with the entire app installed in it. So you fire up the tool which is provided by Microsoft, the MSIX manager. Essentially, it fires up. You call whichever installer, which is MSIEXE, and do the install next. It captures that whole process and gives you the output. And the choice of the output is essentially CIM or VHDX. CIM is essentially a format which gives you multiple files of that particular app package, but it is low on storage. Versus VHDX is a single disk that you get of that app install, and essentially it's heavy on storage. It's probably heavy by a magnitude of 20% in terms of storage. So it's your choice, because remember, this file is going to live on an Azure storage account.
Mm.
And essentially, this is one cool way of delivering apps and apps update, because they are containerized. So you could literally deliver two versions of the same app on the same host pool or the host session host. So what I mean by that is, because they are isolated apps running in their own VHD, you can have two versions of Java running on the same VM, which technically, absolutely right. Technically, you can just run one on any machine, and only through virtualization or app virtualization you can introduce something like what app we used to do. You could run two versions of IE on the same host. Yeah. And this is something similar. You have the ability to run multiple, and you can the user only sees what user he's assigned to through the app attach, and you can have multiple apps running. So this is your great example. If you can manage to MSIX all your apps, which is the big caveat that you have to overcome, because not all apps can be MSIX based. So if you manage to do that, you can use this latest feature in AVD and deliver apps. Amazing way to deliver apps. Plus, there is one more link. If you want to download the MSIX packages from a Microsoft Store, you can just put the link and you can download the MSIX package and put it on your Azure storage account and deliver applications. But obviously, you're limited. If you really had to create your own, your best way is using MSIX Manager tool. This is Microsoft provided tool. And there is one more recommendation around MSIX Hero, which is an open source community based tool and has way more options. The Hero has way more options for conversion.
And are they like witnessing tools that witness and install to package it, or does it actually allow you to do like a first class original package?
I think it's a first class original package is what, and the Hero has way more deeper level options and customizations that you can do.
Yeah.
The MSIX manager tool from Microsoft is lean.
Yeah.
Just do the app install, capture the app.
Yeah.
And that's it. Close the container. That means it's just the VHDX after that.
Yeah.
And that's all. No more customization. But the Hero allows you to do lots and lots of customizations.
Yeah. Okay.
And that's about it. Okay. And we should be able to now go to the rings and then question and answer towards the end completely.
Okay, let me just switch. Okay, so just quickly here on update rings, I guess this is kind of like a response to some of the things we may have seen over the last month around basically making sure things are staggered where possible. And obviously, some of the things we've seen from this is that, while we kind of assume that people are doing things like deployment rings for OS updates and that kind of thing, there's, if it's something where, it's easy, when you can sort of boot the OS and roll back whatever the thing is, even if you're going into like safe mode or something to roll it back, there's it's quite different when you can't actually get to the OS itself. So really here, like, we don't want to sort of talk about at least not, it's going to take a lot more time than what we've got today to cover off, if any of you were impacted by the CrowdStrike issue, and that probably even that could be maybe topic 2 for next month, after we talk about Winget, even though I think those two combined is a
week-long thing.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll have to make a decision. But I guess the thing here is just to sort of gauge what people are doing in terms of having rings. So obviously your OS update rings. I have to assume that people are doing that. But then when it comes to things like app updates or driver updates, actually driver updates, I think, or at least if people are using Woofy in Intune, I'd like to think that there's some kind of approval. I'm not going to say it's always going to be there, but I think OS updates are probably the only one on the list where we could be, or at least we could be most confident that people had update rings.
Yeah.
So has anyone had to rethink their approach to how they do things like updates, etc., over the last few weeks? So has anyone had something like this could happen again? And even if you weren't impacted, for me, the big takeaway of this is, how do you respond to what happened in your organization? What kind of tested rollback type capabilities do you have? So is it something where is it just a Windows update that needs to be rolled back, but you can get into the OS and do it? Or is it all the way to the machine blue screening during startup and not letting you get any further?
Yeah.
What kind of what changes do you think you may need to make to roll out channels or update rings in your org? So has anyone been involved in any of these conversations in their organization? Yeah.
Extensively, but that's I'm not here to talk about what we're doing.
No.
I mean, we're not related to CrowdStrike. We weren't affected by it at all. But when it became available to put rings on driver updates, we did, because we were burnt over the last year a bunch. And again, in our org, depending on the person, if it's the right person being affected or the wrong person being affected by a camera driver not working because of an update, that's one too many. So holding back driver updates is the only one. Obviously, we have OS update rings, but driver updates is the biggest one for us. The rest we don't really worry about too much.
So is anyone else using the driver updates capabilities in Intune?
Yeah, we're about to start. Maybe a bit of a unique case, because we're a SaaS that manages other Intune tenants. So we don't get to decide what rings people have. They come to us with their preference.
Yeah.
Which makes it very difficult to reconcile across tenants. But yeah, we've been seeing a lot of requests for more coverage. So not just Windows and apps, which we've been doing for years, but drivers and Defender telemetry updates and self-updating apps too, like Office and OneDrive. And that gets trickier because it's not just a package that we know how to do. It's like deploying a group policy or something in rings.
Yeah. Okay, so and Sandy's dropped in as well, so driver updates.
Yeah, that is what I meant by the way when I said that. They're specifically controlling them through Intune.
Yeah, because it was, so with the driver updates, I guess the thing there is that prior to it being available, people were yelling and screaming for it. And then it became available. And I just didn't hear anyone talk about it afterwards. So I don't know if it was something where people went, oh, we're happy now. Or if it was just the same two people complaining constantly about it not being available. But it does seem like it is being used. And it was, it was one of those things that we used to see was not necessarily a deployment blocker for Woofy, but it was one of those things that people who had their on-prem WSUS, etc., and were holding on to it for dear life, for some reason I have struggled to comprehend. There was a point in time where I would.
So the question that I posit to the group is how many people are aware of the recent changes around drivers and WSUS?
I'm aware of WSUS has been deprecated.
No, it hasn't.
Hasn't it?
No.
It just smells that way.
I'm sure I saw something.
WSUS is not deprecated.
How can WSUS? How are you going to do server patching?
I swear I read something the other day about it being
So,
deprecated.
Yeah. Well,
Drivers are being removed from WSUS.
sorry. Yes. Yeah.
Gotcha.
That's what's changed.
Mm-hmm.
But WSUS at this point in time has not got a deprecation date associated yet.
Yeah. We rely on
Only
Office.
post
All of our EC2s don't have
once the
internet.
recording is off question, it is probably.
Once recording off, you will get the same answer.
Because server patching.
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes sense.
And
Server patching, there is a better solution.
yes, please.
It's called Azure Arc.
Ah,
I know everybody laughs, but it's actually just as cost effective as using WSUS when you factor
Azure Update Manager with Azure Arc.
Yep.
I've seen it. I like it,
Brilliant.
but then
Good.
it's like a forceful way of going into Azure for people
Yeah.
who are not in Azure. Unfortunately,
The only
that's where the problem is.
time I get to play with Arc is when I deploy an Azure Stack HCI cluster. Otherwise, no one's really seems interested in it. And maybe that's me not talking to them about it, but yeah, that's the only thing I ever put into Arc generally.
Arc probably feels very powerful because you can do a lot of automation execution using Arc after that.
Yeah.
Once Arc is in the environment, you can make it do anything.
Yeah.
But I think the bigger barrier is what if that customer is not in Azure? That's where the
so when
problem is.
we're all EC2s. But it
And I
doesn't
think-
matter. You still use that, right?
That's right.
But they're all
Because you got forwarders.
yeah.
So, and that's the thing, right? Is there are forwarder scenarios that you can use for servers that are in not directly connected environments. Technically, you don't need to put Azure Arc in there for Azure Update Manager. You can use a relay and you can handle all of that.
So you're basically making like a pseudo WSUS cache there, where you punch only that through and then distribute it.
Let's call it a pseudo MCC.
Yeah.
But the value for that is it simplifies the update process, and you don't need to have, other than your gateway server, a dedicated server for WSUS.
Yeah.
They can use the same delivery optimization rules as well.
Yeah, and like over time, you've just seen more and more of the reasons why someone may have had to use WSUS early on. You've just seen more and more of that get chipped away, and then you get to the point where it's like, okay, well, those two things that, or whatever the number of differentiators still are they things that are important to your organization or to what you're doing? And you can't actually ask people that because they'll say, well, yes, of course they are. What are they?
Yeah.
So it's, but it's one of those things. It's like, maybe shouldn't say this while it's being recorded, but I just see WSUS as one of those things that it's just going to get to the point where I'm not saying people don't already hate using it or having to support it or maintain it, but it's just going to get to the point where people go, database is corrupted again. That's it. We're not rebuilding. End of conversation. What's the other option?
Well,
Now the challenge that I have there is I don't think people know about Arc. Arc awareness is it's not zero, but you basically have to be in the Azure hybrid conversation to even know that Arc exists.
100%.
And even there, that's not a 100%. Unless they discover it accidentally.
The first time I heard of it was when someone on our team over a year ago was trying to test deploying Defender for server, and they were in London, and the people helping them with that said, actually, no, I think Microsoft told them you had to use Azure Arc to get it on there. Yeah, and so I mean, I wasn't aware at the time; it wasn't my project, and it almost made us not go with Defender. But we ended up just having a totally separate project for endpoints and servers because the barrier to getting it onto the endpoint of a server, was too high and seemingly complicated compared to Sentinel-1, which at the time was, here you go, here's Sentinel.
Yep.
So, Steve, any more thoughts on rings as such? Like after the recent incident, what's the proposition for the world? How to look at this in a different lens now?
So
now that we know what we know.
the acronym you're going to start hearing more and more is SDF. SDP, Safe Deployment Practices. What is my process to get from the content being delivered to the content landing on the client device? Am I going to sit there and step through that process of, all right, I'm going to do 1%, 9%, 20% or whatever,
Yeah.
and ramp it across so that rather than sitting there and saying on day 0, I'm going to get 100% of my devices and handle that. So this is that those safe deployment practices is exactly what you're seeing with things like auto patch and the ability now that we have in Defender. So for transparency, we only added the ability to do N-1 or delay the definition updates to Defender at the start of the year. Before that, we didn't have that functionality. We now have that functionality for the signature updates. Driver updates, obviously, we have that control, came in the end of last year for to be able to handle that. And this is where that ring-based deployment is helping a lot of customers go down that path. And the thing is, applications, you should be trying to do the same as well, because that saves you from having to run huge sociability testing of your applications. So traditionally, if you go back 15 years ago, well, I've got to run all of my apps. I've got to see how they work, see if there's any interdependency of DLLs sitting in the GAC, causing problems, everything associated. We don't see that as much anymore. But what you also see is more and more customers moving to a gradual deployment rather than saying we have to be on this version over the weekend sort of thing. And this comes down to the application developer. So like I've worked in an organization previously where the developers had hard coded it. So when you go from version 1 to version 2, you cannot have version 1 clients connecting to the version 2 server for the minor releases, not the major releases. So it meant we had to go and change every application over the weekend. That's not a safe deployment practice. There is no rollback. There's no functionality of, okay, what goes on if something goes wrong? And that organization, they made a change to key staffing personnel, and they ended up having 6 weeks where their application was in a race condition between the 2 versions. So it became a big issue. So this is where that was impacting their whole contact center and took down their ability to take inbound and outbound phone calls.
Mm-hmm. This SDP,
yes,
will this be a thought for the SaaS providers, or the consumers have to start thinking about this? Because, like, for example, getting definitions and getting them right now is critical from a security standpoint, right? Which is, nobody's denying that.
Yep.
You can't, you shouldn't stagger the definition if it's a 0 day on stuff like that, right?
So that's a good question. And this comes down to the vendors and associated. So if you look at most of the big vendors, they have some sort of this process in place already. They have, whether it's the ITIL framework, whether it's MOC, whether it's their safe deployment practices, where there's checks and balances going through.
Okay. So do you want me to stop the recording? Just think.
Sure.
Okay. So yeah, I'll stop the recording here just so that there might be some conversation pieces that I had here that Steve or maybe other people don't want recorded. So I'll stop the recording now. We'll keep going. So don't leave. I'll just stop the recording. Because the other thing here is that Copilot is capturing all of this. So
Thank you, Overlord.
To me, that sounds like a perspective thing though as well. What does ST mean?